everyone, and welcome to the SME South Africa podcast. I'm Marina Stein, the editor at SME South Africa. Today, we are talking about funding education. This means understanding funding, understanding what your business needs are, and what exactly it means when you say you are funding ready. The SME funding gap is estimated to be 350 billion rand, and rectifying this issue is not as simple as just dispersing money. The SME landscape is seeing that the missing middle is growing due to stricter funding requirements, but also a lack of understanding what it means to be funding ready. I'm joined today by Jameel Khan, co-founder of Unconventional CA and chartered accountant. He is an entrepreneur and angel investor who has supported thousands of entrepreneurs and small businesses with resources to help them thrive. Welcome, Jameel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be here, Marina. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So if I can just dive in, let's start with the missing middle. What is it, and how do businesses know that they fall into that category?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I think when we talk about the missing middle, I guess we're talking about businesses that are falling in between doing R1 million turnover, let's say up to 50 million rand in turnover, right? Now, the missing middle, I think, exists for two reasons, right? The first thing is, as entrepreneurs, we start our businesses, we want to make money, we want to get going, and we start, right? We have to be the HR person, finance person, salesperson, etc., right? And typically businesses fail or a high percentage of businesses fail within the first 3 to 5 years. So it does take time to build a business, right, to get up to that R1 million mark. Now, around about that time, when you get to that R1 million mark, that's when you find entrepreneurs are now starting to ask questions around how do I grow my business? How do I, there's a little bit more certainty around what they do. They've got a little bit of a market, and now they're kind of looking for scale, right? Now, what we find is, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting, or a lot of entrepreneurs when they start, is they're not keeping records, they're not keeping their compliance up to date, they're basically surviving, right? And when you get to this point of R1 million and now you're starting to look for potential funding, what is it that funders are looking for? They then tend to ask you for financial statements, for historic information, for your compliance, etc. And this is where now we start to see like this knowledge, this gap fall, right? In terms of, okay, as an entrepreneur, do I actually have all of this stuff? And most of the time they don't, right? So now who do you approach? Where do you go for funding? So that's sort of the first issue. And then I think the second issue is then more on the funder side of things, right? Is, we've got traditional banks, and banks, banks have their own legislative requirements, etc., that SMEs would need to submit for funding. And most of it, like I said, is compliance, financials. You got to have a good business case, etc. I mean, the bar is quite high there. But then we've also got the DFI side of things, which, the idea around the creation around SEDVA and a lot of the governmental organizations is to kind of plug this gap between being the established business and being the startup. But what we've seen is that a lot of like DFIs have now moved their compliance standards more like up to the banks. So yeah, I think it's two sides of the coin here, right? On the entrepreneur and SME side, and the SME side of things, it's an educational thing. It's trying to anticipate at some point you may need funding, so to start putting in your compliance, understanding your business, and managing your finances more better on that side of things. So it's a learning gap. And then on the funding side of things, it's about like trying to bring some of the funders down in terms of the compliance and legislative requirements, which seems to be increasing year on year.
This is so important as an aspect to the larger funding gap. Now, often this is cited as 350 billion rand, huge. But this two-pronged problem seems to be that there is money, from what you're saying, there is money to be accessed, yet businesses don't meet the requirements. So how can I as a business ensure that I do meet the requirements, and how can I become familiar with what these requirements are?
Yeah, look, you're correct. I mean, I recently saw a stat. I think the NEF has like 2.5 billion to disperse, and they've only dispersed 600 million. And statistically speaking, I mean, I'm not sure the source about it, but basically there is funding available. I think there's a number of organizations funding that have, we've got the funding available. It's just there's not enough pipeline accessing that funding. And so realistically, it's a knowledge gap, right? It's on the SME side of things, we got to start asking ourselves some questions, right? So the first thing is in the work that we do with entrepreneurs is that a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid of their finances, or they don't want to look at their finances, right? Typically, the sentiment is, there's an accountant, I can pay the accountant is going to do my finances, right? But basic things like do we as entrepreneurs understand the difference between profitability and cash flow? Right? Our profit and loss statement is not the same as our cash flow statement, right? And so, as entrepreneurs, we can't avoid these things, right? We have to do some. And the best thing to do is to start this when you start your business. From the get go, start to understand we're not all CAs or accountants, right? I mean, we understand that entrepreneurs are subject matter experts in terms of what they do. And yes, you got a CA or an accountant to help you manage your finances, but you need to be sitting with them once a month, at least for 2 hours, asking them, explain this to me. What is my business actually doing? Because, if we can use the example of, you could make R1 million in profit, right? But if you're buying a piece of equipment, that's coming out of your cash flow. That's something that's not touching your income statement, right? It's moving on to your balance sheet. So even though you got that R1 million of profit, you've now bought a piece of equipment. How much money do you actually have in the bank, right? And then also the vice of that, the vice versa is, we work with entrepreneurs sometimes that only use their bank statement. They don't really understand the profit and loss side of things. So money comes in, it goes out. It comes in, it goes out, up until such a point as there's no money coming in, but I need money to go out, right? And so there is definitely a level of understanding that all entrepreneurs need, on that side of things. Yeah.
It sounds so important to really educate yourself as an entrepreneur on understanding the elements to, like you said, your cash flow versus your income statement, knowing that technically the money's there, it's just tied up in an asset.
Correct. Yeah.
So education is definitely something that stands out.
Yeah.
What other elements do you see entrepreneurs need to educate themselves on?
Yeah. The first thing is just the financial part of things. The second thing is when we as entrepreneurs are looking for funding, right? Do we really understand why we need that funding for our business? Right. So I think it's an educational element, but it's around understanding, why do I need this funding for my business? Is it to fund a new asset? Is it for growth? Is it to fund a purchase order? Because these different understanding what type of funding you're looking for will then help you identify the right funder to fund your business, because not all funding is the same, right? So I actually want to take a step back and say, when we're looking for funding, are we looking to take a loan that's repayable, or are we looking for a partner, somebody to invest in our business and maybe put funding into the business, right? Now, as entrepreneurs, we need to understand what is the difference between these two things. What are we actually looking for? Like, if we're looking for a business partner that has good networks, connections, then maybe I need an angel investor, because angel investors not only come with capital, but also some level of skill. Typically the legal or CA or whatever it might be. So wherever there's a gap in our business, hey, maybe I actually need a partner in my business, right? Whereas on your debt side, but then also you're giving away some form of ownership, right, of the company. And then on the debt side of things, that's, I'm taking money and I'm going to repay it back. But if you look at like purchase order financing, typically that's quite expensive. Like we're talking 3 to 5% per month. But you only need that capital for 2 to 3 months. Once you service that purchase order, you're paying it back, right? Whereas if we're looking for more longer term funding, then we may be looking at a 12 to 24 month loan or even a 5-year loan. So it's very critical for us to understand, why do we need this funding? And then go out and do some research in terms of who offers this specific type of funding. And often entrepreneurs that I engage with, they'll say, you know what, I need funding. Can you, is there anybody that can give us grant funding, right? And, everybody wants a grant.
That's so true, because everybody wants, I almost want to say, free money.
Yeah.
When you look at the interest rate, you get a little bit of a heart attack wondering how on earth are you going to pay back this loan. So what we also see at SME South Africa is entrepreneurs prefer grant funding, or at least something that doesn't have such a high interest.
Low interest funding, right?
Yes.
And I think it's I think this is also another mindset, psychological thing that we've created for ourselves in our head is, hey, I heard this entrepreneur got 100,000 Rand in grant funding. Okay, I'm going to go chase the grant funding.
Yes.
Right? Without actually asking the question, why do I need funding? What is this funding going to be used for? It's just easy to want the free funding. But then on the other side of things, like I often, tell entrepreneurs is that if there is some sort of grant funding available, you can bet there's a lot of people applying for that. Right? So the sentiment around, there's this funding available and I just never get it, it's probably because there's so many people applying for the grant funding, right? I want to just address that point, like you're saying, like often entrepreneurs are like, I'm getting this loan at prime, right? I don't know what prime is. Let's say it's 8%, right? Actually, I want it at 4%, not 8%. And then they push you for the rate. But, when I do engage them, I often ask them, like, why do you need this funding, right? If obviously you want a 1 million Rand loan and it comes at 8% interest per month, if you know that you can generate enough cash flow or product and make enough margin that you're making a margin of 10 or 15% per annum, then why not take an 8% interest loan? So it's a mindset thing, right? In as much as we want to push this rate down to the lowest lower of it, if we're already making a 10 or 20% margin on our product and we need to scale our product, then there's nothing wrong with taking a loan at prime. So I think as entrepreneurs, we need to really, that's why one of the biggest things I tell entrepreneurs is, and you'll find this, like when you approach a funder and you're submitting that funding pack, you'll be interrogated on how did you get to this number? Why do you need this specific amount of money, right? And most of the time, entrepreneurs are just, I need 10% of this money for marketing, 20% for sales, 40% for operations. I was like, what does that look like? So another educational element, try to understand your business inside out and understand why you need this funding in as much granular detail as possible, because that's what's going to convince the funder. Between, Marina and Jameel applying for funding, if Marina is loose and is just saying, well, I just need the funding, and I've got a detailed breakdown, I'm going to use it for this, I'm also going to be able to repay it back to you in X amount of period, that gives your funder confidence, right? So the second part is educational.
So I guess that really also brings us to the whole element of funding readiness. Because an entrepreneur doesn't always understand why they're almost interrogated when they come to actually the point of applying for funding. So a lot of what we're talking about today relates to the SME Funding Summit. This day is a full-day event that will have expert speakers like Jameel, panel discussions, and various funders exhibiting to all share in a day, talking and discussing what SMEs need when it comes to funding. This event will take place on the 18th of June at the Focus Rooms, so grab your tickets before they run out. The link is in our description. Can you elaborate more on what you're seeing with regards to being funding ready and what SMEs often miss?
Yeah, correct. So, we run a few investment to funding readiness type programs. The first thing, so, we sort of categorize it into two different categories, right? Quantitatively, so what do your numbers look like, right? Historically, so we're looking on the quantitative, historical. Do you have financial statements? Is your compliance up to date? Tax, CIPC, all of that kind of stuff, because that's kind of looking historically at how you've been managing your finances, and that's something your traditional financiers will ask, right? Then we look at prospectively, right, to say, okay, do you have a financial model, right? So typically we'll help them build out a financial model then to say, which then obviously then links to your cash flow forecast. So it's like, okay, based on my current business model, using these assumptions, this is the amount of money I'm potentially going to make over the next 2 to 3 years. It's funny, and most of the time entrepreneurs are like, okay, this year I'm making 10 Rand, next year I'm going to be making 50 Rand, and year 3 I'm going to be making 1,000 Rand. And I'm like, but like this needs to be justified. Like you can't just, once again, just thumb suck, my business is going to exponentially grow, and often you're going to get more interrogated when you do that, right? You got to be realistic, looking at the forecast. But that's the second part we look at quantitatively, right? Now, this is an area that entrepreneurs are very much afraid of. And so we tend to spend quite a bit of time just coaching them through it slowly but surely. This is what this means. This is why it's built that way. Try to give them a better understanding of, finances. Finances and compliance is not a scary thing if you understand the basics. And I think this is where the mindset comes in from entrepreneurs, is because they sort of shy to disclose that I actually don't understand my finances. They tend to just shy away from it, right? And so, as entrepreneurs, it's okay to not understand things. You're not an accountant, but spend some time every month trying to understand these things. So that's on the quantitative side of things. And then we look at the qualitative side of things, which is then building the story, right? So your business plan, who you are, what your business does, why do you do what you do, because funders will also try to understand you, right, as a person, because at the end of the day, it's a relationship that you're going to be entering into with your funder, right? You have an obligation to pay it back in some form or another. So they want to understand you and your business. And there we work on the story. We work on, we try to link it into ESG and, those kind of things. So that's the secondary part. And then that's sort of internal, right? The qualitative and the quantitative. But then after that, on the funder side of things, you got to try to plug in the right funder, right? So, if you're like a waste business, then we try to look specifically, or we recommend that the entrepreneurs look specifically for, DFIs or funders that are looking for green type entrepreneurs.
Yes, almost like industry specific.
Correct,
or
yeah.
specialized funders.
Yeah, correct. Because typically those funders also come with a wealth of knowledge that they can also assist in your business in the particular industry to help navigate one or two things. Because the more specific you can be in terms of, I need this specific funder, the more effort you can put directly into that. Because often entrepreneurs are also doing the shotgun approach.
Yes.
If I apply for 1,000 funders, hopefully one will land, right? But rather, if you find that specific funder that fits your specific business, that links into the specific funding that you're looking for, your probabilities are way better of getting funding from that particular person than just hitting and hoping. Yeah.
You alluded to that entrepreneurs are often fearful of their finances, almost like it's a dirty word to even say.
Yeah.
Why do you see that happening?
Sure, it's a good question, eh? I think, to some extent, maybe there's a bit of a mental block in that, this is complicated stuff. So even if I look at it, I'm not really going to understand it. So I'll rather not look at it. Right? So I think there's a little bit of a mental block there. Also, and then secondary to that is it's easy to just outsource it to an accountant. To just say, okay, here's an accountant. They'll make sure everything is fine, so I don't have to worry about this at all. But yeah. And, often when I'm engaging entrepreneurs that can't answer things, then I'll just focus on that fully. Because it's not only finances, right?
Yes.
It's as entrepreneurs, we actually need to know a bit of everything, right? So where we're weak in particular areas, that's exactly where we need to focus, right? So I think that mental block kicks in very quickly because it's easy to outsource it, right? It's not so easy to outsource our main product and service, right? And oftentimes we start a business and we fall in love with our product or service, what we've created. And then all the other side stuff just becomes noise, right? Marketing, okay, I'll find somebody. Finance, okay, I'll find somebody. But the financial part is such a crucial component of the business. You really have to at least know to an extent what's happening in your business. And finance is not something that happens immediately. Like I can show you a cash flow forecast now and maybe take you through 10 things. You're not going to remember all 10. You maybe remember one. So you need to be engaging it regularly to start to build that skill, right? Maybe also because entrepreneurs have never looked at it in that early stage of their business, it feels like it's too late now. So even if I look at it now, it's not going to make any sense to me. Right? So it's just one bite at a time. Just start to look at it, start to learn slowly but surely. Because if you want your business to go from that 1 million to 50 million, at some point you're going to have to really understand your financials. Yeah.
Do you find that businesses that are almost subsistence businesses, lifestyle businesses, where entrepreneurs aren't always thinking ahead to the growth, the trajectory? Some people aren't always thinking, I want to be this multinational or nationwide business. Do you find that that mindset or that block is often present in those businesses?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think, yeah, I mean, like having a lifestyle business and then trying to have a business that grows. As entrepreneurs, we need to know what we want, because exactly to your point is typically when we work with lifestyle businesses, as soon as there's enough cash flow, those owners pull out the cash flow. They'll typically throw it at, use it for their own personal stuff, whatever it might be. Whereas, if you're obviously trying to grow your business, then you need to be investing that cash flow back into the business. So, yeah, maybe lifestyle entrepreneurs, depending on, I would say there is a little bit of a link there because your typical lifestyle entrepreneur is probably a one, maybe two-man band, and they're comfortable with that size of business. So, okay, let me just pull dividends or cash flow out of the business as we make money, and I'll do whatever I want to with it. So there's no conscious forward application into how are we going to invest this back to take our business to grow to the next level. But then at the same time, if that's your aspiration to take your business to the next level, yeah, then you definitely need to be understanding what's happening from a financial point of view in your business, because at each stage of growth in your business, there'll be different commitments, right? You're going to have more staff, then you need to see how long can I afford salaries for? Do I create a 6 to 12 month runway? As you grow your business, then you can start to interrogate what is my actual profit margin? Do I need to be making more margin? All of these more advanced sort of things come in. I think at that stage or later on in business, once you do hit like a 50 million rand business, then you'll probably have a full-time financial manager or
True.
full-time finance person. But on some level, you still need to understand what's happening financially in your business, because you don't want to just give that control away to the other person. Yeah. So there is a difference, I think, between lifestyle businesses and more serious businesses. Not to say, my opinion is, there's nothing wrong with having a lifestyle business if you know that's what you want.
Yes, of course.
Right? But if you're saying that you want to grow this business and you're treating it like a lifestyle business, then you're just kidding yourself. If you're pulling out all the cash flow, if you're not sure what's happening financially, then the expectation of turning yourself into a big business is just unrealistic.
Of course. So if I am a business that's now realizing I've been in operation for 5, maybe 6 years, and I now want to grow, I'm ready, or at least I think I'm ready to scale, but then I find out I'm not funding ready. What advice do you have for those businesses?
I mean, what I'd suggest is to, like I said, look at the numbers part first. Like, what information do I have? Get my compliance up to date. Make sure I've got financial statements. Make sure that the historic information is in place. Then, like we alluded to earlier, if you are looking to grow your business through funding, because entrepreneurs are after two things, right? Either access to new markets and sales or access to funding, right? Realistically, the best way to grow your business is to get more sales, because then your customers are funding your business,
Yes.
right? Now, often we can't do that without some sort of growth and funding. That's where the funding conversation comes in, right? So the second piece of advice would then be to try and understand that distinction. What do I need to do to grow my business? And is it a funding thing? Or is it a customer thing? Or is it an operational thing? Try to get a better sense of what actually needs to happen to then grow my business, right? Now, what you said is we're looking at funding in this particular regard, right? So, okay, so now I've checked my historical data, compliance, all of that is up to date. Now the next part is, okay, what is my story? What does my business plan look like? What is my goal? Where do I want my business to grow over the next couple of years? And build out that story. You can see all three of these things are all internal. They're all in the control of the entrepreneur to do, right? Once we know that and we understand our story and we understand our package, then do research around what sort of, oh yeah, and the fourth thing is what sort of funding we want. You know,
Right.
like I touched on, like, am I looking for a partner, an angel investor, a loan, this or that? Now that we prepared, all our internal ducks are in a row, right? Often, like, we refer entrepreneurs to funders, and the funder will, based on the response, you can already see they're not interested, just based on some of the information packs which get sent through. Like, there's crucial missing initial information of the initial application form. Now you've already put yourself on the back foot because you've come unprepared to the funder, right? The other thing we need to bear in mind is funders also have jobs, right?
Yes.
They have to make money.
They're also businesses.
They're also businesses. They also have to make money. So, yes, it's a bit of a headache and there's a lot of red tape, etc. But somebody's fulfilling a role there, right? So if you come in 100% prepared into, it's another engagement. It's an engagement, right? It's like if you wouldn't go to a customer or client half prepared, right? So why do we as entrepreneurs go to funders half prepared and expect them to fill the gaps for us, right?
Yes.
So get all your internal stuff in a row, and then you can do the research around what specific funds can I target, right? I mean, there's specific female funds, there's specific ESG funds, like if you're touching on something environmental.
Youth funds.
There's youth funds. There's so many of these things. So make a list. And now with AI, it's so easy just to specifically create a list for yourself in terms of, this is my business, this is my model, what funds can I specifically target that will give me the best chance to apply?
Yeah, so even understanding your business and then just taking it to Google and asking the question.
Correct, yeah.
Women own businesses, funding for women-owned businesses or youth businesses.
For youth fund, yeah, correct.
And going from there.
And going from there, right? I mean, I also tell entrepreneurs to do like a two-pronged approach. What I would suggest, a two-pronged approach in terms of governmental DFI funding, because typically that's kind of where you get the lower rates or the potential, the cost of capital is lower, but your timeline is longer. So if you are going that sort of route, governmental DFI, then it can't be something you're never going to apply to any efforts and expect a response in a week.
No.
Right? It's just not going to happen, right? So the cost of capital might be lower, but then you got to know the timeline is going to be very long, right? And it's a process. You got to jump through a few hoops. It's got to go through committees. They call it ICs, investment committees. That happens once a month. So the more prepared you are, the more you lining yourself up for the best opportunity when you go through that processing queue at the top, right? So go that governmental DFI route, and then also go the private sector route. Then private sector capital, your cost of capital is generally higher, but your timelines are shorter. Again, like so many, I think in the past month there was about 5 entrepreneurs that reached out and they're like, hey, I need X amount of capital and I need it in the next 4 days. And
It's unrealistic
it's
timelines.
unrealistic, and you're not prepared. You haven't shared all your information. Like, who are you kidding?
That's true. And I think what entrepreneurs also need to understand is that the long list of requirements, whether it's a traditional funder, like a bank, for instance, or even one of the FDIs, if you have compliance requirements, they exist for a reason, even if they are quite stringent.
Yeah, correct. No, 100%. So you have to fulfill and do that. It's actually something popped in my head, which there's like billboards nowadays that say apply for funding and get it in 48 hours.
Yes.
Right. And I think it's created a certain narrative for entrepreneurs because that sort of funding is not your normal funding.
No.
Right. That's like either you got a purchase order funding, and typically those entrepreneurs have linked in their accounting systems or profiles or something into those databases.
And that's also if you meet the requirements.
If you meet the requirements, correct. So now I'm an entrepreneur, I'm on the database, I meet the requirements, I got my signed purchase order, then I'm going to get funding in 48 hours. So, I think it's, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we need to, because also I do understand sometimes you get a purchase order today, right? And now you want to plan and do all of that stuff, right? But the reality is like we're saying now, you have to be on these people's databases. They have to already know who you are, because I'm sure there's like FICA rules, KYC rules, there's regulations around these things, right? And so be as best prepared as you can to place yourself in those databases. Then potentially you'll get your purchase order financing in 48 hours. Yeah.
And this brings us back to educating yourself on what it is that your business actually needs. Firstly, from a funding perspective, and secondly, from being ready for funding.
Yeah, correct.
For receiving the funding.
Yeah, 100%. And often, in our funding readiness programs, it's, funding as a standalone in itself is difficult unless you're taking on the funding at risk, right? So, okay, I need R1 million, right? Great. But your funder is going to say, why do you need R1 million, right? So funding and market access have to go hand in hand, right? So it's something else to think about as entrepreneurs is unless we're using it to, there was an entrepreneur, I think 2 months ago that, in one of our programs from a coaching point of view, they currently lease like an office space. And they were like, you know what, I need funding. I want to buy the office space, right? And then why do you want to buy the office space? Well, then I don't have to pay rent, right? So I was like, okay, but do you know if your cost of capital is more than what you're paying on the rent side? Remember also when you're renting, you don't have to service the space. You don't have to, there's certain costs that you don't incur.
There's certain costs that's not on you depending on what your contract says.
Depending on what so so I asked him, have you done this financial calculation? No, because the idea of buying the place and having this ownership title means that I now have an asset. I'm like, but from a business point of view, do you really need this asset? Because their business didn't need the office.
Yes.
But now they just wanted the office. So, these sort of things we need to think about as entrepreneurs is why do you need that office?
That's so true.
Like, if it makes financial sense, sure. But then you're going to have to go find somebody that's willing to give you the money or fund you the money to buy this office. Then that's where those conversations around what we are talking, it's like, what's the funder that can give me the lowest rate that I can buy the office with? And then I was like, but you haven't even done the financial calculation of whether it makes sense to buy the office or to rent the office. No, that's why you just want the lowest cost of capital.
Yes. Thank you, Jameel. This is so insightful. I must say, if there's one word that just sums up all that we've said today, is just education. Educating yourself about what your business needs from a financial point of view, not necessarily a funding point of view, but also then when it does come to funding, really understanding what your funding needs are. Why do you want the funding? Why do you need the funding? And what do you need to do to be fundable.
Mm.
Also, as you mentioned, understanding there's different kinds of funders that you can approach. So just educate yourself as an entrepreneur. I'm looking so forward to also having you join us with the SME Funding Summit that will be happening now in June 18th. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It was awesome. It was a pleasure to be here. And I mean, if you are an entrepreneur watching and you're looking for more education, please do check us out on www.ember360.org. Yeah, we've got some cool stuff that we've launched there.
Awesome. We'll definitely drop that link into our description as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Marina.
To everyone watching and listening today, share with us in the comments section what you found most educational about this session and where you are setting your sights on educating yourself. Remember to follow us on social media and share this episode with a fellow entrepreneur who can benefit from Jameel's discussion. Bye-bye.